This week we visit one of Britain's most attractive waterside cities for the third round of the Yukoba Offshore Powerboat Championships and the first running of their Gold Cup. We are, of course, in Hull for the 4th annual Humber Offshore Powerboat Grand Prix, and there was an added dimension to this year's event. For the first time, there was racing on Saturday as well as Sunday. A short, very competitive circuit had been arranged to allow the first heat to take place in spectacular view of Hull's new waterfront. The points accrued would then count towards Sunday's race, and a prestigious new trophy, the Hull Gold Cup, was to be presented to the aggregate winner. And that winner would be the boat that exceeded the previous best performances here in each class by the greatest margin. It pitched the big in with the small and the brave in with the fearless, all in search of this pot of gold. The introduction of an additional race has consolidated Hull's position as Britain's leading offshore powerboat venue, a fact officially recognised by Yukoba, one of the sport's governing bodies. One of the venue's most avid fans is Class 2 competitor David Allenby. He won here in 90 and 91, although his luck ran out last year when 2 of his 4 engines broke down. This year, though, Allenby is well prepared with a cockpit full of latest technology and a powerhouse that has propelled him to 4 victories in 5 races. He explained why he thought the new format of racing here was a definite step forward.
This year it's a Gold Cup event, which traditionally runs over at least 2 races. And today is the shorter race. It's a multi-lap, one circuit, doesn't change. It's quite a novel idea. Hull's a good venue, and it's building up the event each year. And I think it's a nice variation. It's nice for everyone. It's a long way to come, so to put 2 races in, it adds to the value of the event for everybody, I think.
The main threat to Allenby in the Gold Cup would surely come from this man, American Charles Burnett. He's moved up from the 4-litre class this year after finishing 3rd in the World Championships in Guernsey last September. He now sports a 28-foot American Skater Cat, powered by 2 2.5-litre fuel-injected Mercury outboards, producing a total horsepower of 500. And in spite of a recent victory over Allenby, he still feels in need of a secret weapon, if he's to maintain such form. Of course, you were a winner at the Euro World 2 weeks ago. David Allenby in Assegai 4 is here again. He's looking for revenge. How do you feel about it?
Well, we have actually a secret strategy that will become obvious when the race starts. So even though he's got 7 feet of boat on it, and it is quite a rough river there today, we hope that it'll put us out the lead very quickly.
You've had the advantage of being out on the course in the last 10 minutes or so. What's it like out there?
Extremely rough. It's, I would say, rougher than the outer end of the course was where we broke the boat last year. So I hope that people are going to be real careful out there. There's some real big holes.
This year's race also saw a return to the sport for one of the big names. Penthouse were back in the action with 2-litre in the capable hands of rookies Max Walker and Graham Brooks. One of the favourites in a very big 2-litre turnout was John Miller's 27-foot Campbell Wright catamaran. This is one of the magnificently designed racing machines from the pen of Lorne Campbell, already a world beater. And Hull also heralded the first outing of the season for world 4-litre runner-up Rob Mills from Manchester. Quite capable of taking anyone on regardless of size, if you'll pardon the expression, and considered by many to be one of the top drivers in the country in any class. A fearless approach is Mills' forte, and it was such driving that all but crowned him world champion in 1992. After a final picture from one of the many local experts, the fleet set off on stage 1 of this new powerboat experience. Everyone was in with a chance, but no one was doubting the bookies' pre-race favourite was David Allenby's Assegai 4. Everyone, that is, apart from Burnett. Armed with his secret weapon, he was set for a classic encounter. And as Hull waited for the outcome, the crews all made their way to the start line, ready for the first action of the weekend. We join the action at the start of race 1. and where the 1.3 and 2 litre boys must have been wondering how anyone could possibly have ever imagined the short laps up to the Humber Bridge and back could be described as flat. 5 minutes later, the second start, featuring the larger 4 litre Class 2 and production boats, got underway. Here the going was slightly easier, but even so it was always going to be one of those races where care and concentration were the essential ingredients. In this department, Manchester's Rob Mills has an abundance, and it was his D11 Papa Kilo that thundered into the lead past Alan Webb and down to the bridge for the first time. It was also time to look at the American's secret strategy. He claimed all would be revealed at the start, yet here he was languishing at the back. Maybe it was so secret his pit crew forgot to tell him what it was. But whatever it was not the sort of start required in company such as Allenby if you have serious intentions of winning. With the race only 5 minutes old, Burnett had already left himself with an awful lot to do. And things weren't going that well for Mansbridge either in M13 King's Tyre Racing. He was being pushed by Alan Webb's Flying Flipper, and his aging Cougar catamaran was taking its second pounding in a fortnight. Up front, however, the longest boat had the biggest lead, and on board Allenby was loving every minute of it. At the end of lap 1 out of 5, he was well clear and averaging over 80 miles per hour. The 4 XR2 engines that had given him so many problems in '92 were now on song, and he looked invincible. It was hard to believe the 36-foot Tornado hull had almost sank at Liverpool 2 weeks before, after being seriously holed in heavy seas. On that occasion, Allenby was forced onto the beach in order to save it, but now repaired and a few modifications along the way, it has never looked more impressive. Behind the leaders, Mills, with half the horsepower and a 10-foot shortfall in boat length, was still paying scant regard to the choppy race track, and kept the pressure on the bigger boats ahead of him by producing searing bursts of speed. The reality is he relishes these conditions, and this was confirmed by his third place overall, just over a minute off the lead with a quarter of the race gone. It was the sort of performance we've come to expect from Mills, ever enthusiastic, always the aggressor, and clinical in his execution. In fourth place overall, Martin Mansbridge and Paul Barnard in M13 were hoping for a first Ucoba Championship finish of the season, but hadn't quite got to grips with the unpredictable surface. 1 minute they were riding flat, the next they would find themselves launched skyward by an unrelenting backwash. It was tough going for the Cougar, first raced in the 80s by Steve Bourne, and in fairness, Mansbridge has had little practice in it. Here, though, he is beginning to show a little of his potential, and for the moment was on target for a morale-boosting finish. Second overall was the American Charles Burnett, who had eventually got past Mills in the 4-litre boat, but still hadn't impressed the leader. His secret strategy would now need to be a secret weapon. Nothing short of a missile was going to stop a rampant Allenby. Having said that, Burnett's boat was riding exceptionally well, and if the unlikely did occur and he found an extra 5 miles per hour somewhere, he could still cause an upset. But it wasn't on the cards. At the halfway point, Mansbridge's hopes of at least finishing were dead and buried. Frustrated yet again by mechanical problems, the Southampton driver sat on the offending engines and watched the rest go by. In the 2-litre class, with just over a lap to go, the unlikely combination of a catamaran and mono were leading the proceedings. Peter Little and David Arthur's super-fast Argo Cat just ahead of Jeremy Watts' yellow aluminium forged craft. The heavier metal boat is much more suited to the relentless pounding, so it was almost outrageous that the lightest boat on the day should be leading them all into the last lap. It was an impressive drive by the former 1.3-litre world champions, and one that would surely put them amongst the fancied runners in the forthcoming European finals. Meanwhile, the two favourites in the class were battling it out for third and fourth, with John Miller and Adrian Jardine in the yellow boat just holding off world champions Tony Genvie and Eric Braithwaite. Miller's commitment to the sport is unquestionable. Like Genvie, the purchase of a boat from world-beating design board of Lorne Campbell is an indication of serious intentions. and he's another who justifiably expects to conquer a Europe. The same drive and commitment applied to Allenby's back in 1985 at their first ever event in Portsmouth. Since then, their trophy cupboard has become a veritable treasure trove of illustrious memorabilia, including 2 4-litre championship wins, a class win in the Great Cowes Torquay Classic, and runners-up in the World Championship, just 2 points short of the target. Here the challenge may not have been quite as great, but they got what they came for, a win on day one and a hand on the new cup. Burnett coaxed his cultured vulture into second, with newcomers Mark Shepherd and Robert Turner an impressive third. In 4-litre, Mills maintained his early form, finishing first in class and third overall, with Cornishman Alan Butters and Chris Andrews second. 2-litre, a loosening nut on the last lap cost Peter Little and David Arthur their moment of glory, while John Miller had his, getting past them all for his third victory in 4 races ahead of Jeremy Watson's brother Alistair. But it was the cousins who outperformed them all on day one, at an average speed of almost 72 miles per hour. They had repeated their victories here in 90 and 91, and were looking forward to day 2, and must have been quietly confident of adding the impressive Gold Cup to their classy collection. But very little is a foregone conclusion in offshore powerboat racing, as they were to find out to their cost the next day.
Thank you, Brian. Is that better?
Thank you.
John Miller and Adrian Jardine were another crew with Gold Cup ambitions, but they too were to discover the unpredictability of life offshore in a powerboat. On day 2, nothing much had changed as far as the conditions were concerned. It was still lumpy, but the distance was up from a 60-mile doddle the first day. This time the bigger boats would race almost 150. The 2-litre and 1.3-litre would be asked to cover less than 100, but even that on such a day would test the back, the arms, let alone the boat. As soon as the yellow flag changed to green, Watts in the yellow monohull was away yet again, but he would always be under threat from an ensuing pack, including Saturday's winner Turning Point and world champions Genvy and Braithwaite in Swiftwood. In the second start, the larger boats, 4-litre, Class 2, Class 1 and production, were soon in their stride, with the white 28-foot Phantom monohull of Alan Butters BC Systems the pick of the bunch. It's Butters' first season in offshore, having come across from offshore circuit racing. He's in great form, but Mills, as usual, was paying him close attention. Burnett had once again spent most of the morning plotting the downfall of arch-rival Allenby, but as on the previous day, had left himself in deficit right from the start. But no one could ever accuse the American of giving up. Up front, a newcomer to this competition was Roger Fletcher's enormous Class 1 entry Shockwave. He couldn't win the Cup, of course, but there was a small matter of championship points, and with all that superior horsepower, pride as well. Not surprisingly, he led the charge at the end of lap 1 with Allenby's Asakai 4 second, but still in pole position to lift the trophy. But offshore powerboat racing is all about navigation as well as immense power. And from a position of growing strength, Allenby was soon hot-putting it back down the track in the opposite direction, having missed a mark and facing certain disqualification. He needed to act quickly to redress the situation, but even so, it took 7 minutes, and now he was against the clock and forced to increase his speed to 90 miles per hour in an attempt to catch up. In 2-litre, as on the previous day, Jeremy Watts in 96 was always in the lead or thereabouts. But on this occasion, he had surprise company in the form of rookie Max Walker's 23-foot Frode Penthouse. Driving the boat exactly the way builder Michael Frode had in mind when he designed it, Walker was showing little regard for reputations or even the form book. This was his first national points race, and he was showing an uncanny liking for the big time, leaving Watts in the wash in his quest to become one of the few to win at the debut meeting. But Watts has proved in the past that he's a fighter, and he eventually got past Walker for the second time, only to lead the Penthouse crew the wrong side of a mark. Behind him, the rest of 2-litre were shaping up nicely. There was plenty of infight and plenty of action, with Stephen Hoare in TX Controls number 46 holding 5th place, and the might of Burnett's superior powered skater at the same time. For Burnett, these are trying times. He knows the boat will go better, but mechanical gremlins and Allenby's sudden discovery of an extra 10 miles per hour in Assegai 4 has left him somewhere in no man's land in the stakes for Class 2 supremacy. His cause wasn't helped by the memories of his horrendous crash here last year, from which he and co-driver Ian McDougall dramatically escaped unhurt before the boat sank. But for whatever reason, he was never quite on the pace and was eventually forced out with yet another breakdown. Back with 2 litre, and the end was nigh for Jeremy Watts and brother Alistair. They were still in front, but would face disqualification if they reached the finishing line, having missed that earlier mark. So it was probably fortunate their campaign ended with mechanical failure. It would certainly save a few post-race blushes for the crew ranked 3rd in the world. But before they finally bowed out, they gave us a taste of how tough life is at the top in 2 litre, and how relentless the sea can be when you confront it at almost 80 miles per hour, mile after mile. After a struggle, first heat winners in 2 litre, John Miller and Adrian Jardine in the Yellow Cat, were finally up at the front. But they, like Watts before them, were now facing the taunts of an ebullient Max Walker in the white monohull. Like a dog with a bone, Walker just wouldn't let go, piercing Miller's armour with a string of explosive bursts. But what neither knew was Walker, like Watts, had been disqualified. It was a tough ride and rough luck on Walker, who had displayed great talent during the weekend. But at least he'd served notice of his arrival, and in future his presence will be a threat in any company. In Class 2, Allenby was back on course and still charging in an attempt to make up the lost time for his earlier error. He was still leading the class, but his priorities were centred around the covetous Gold Cup, and there was still plenty to do before time ran out. By now, time had already run out for Miller. In his dogfight with Walker, he had paid the price for the breakdown. The winner of 2 litre would now come from the pack. And as the race entered its final stages, conditions improved dramatically, and the 5 miles or so down to the bridge and back became a comparative mill pond. Taking advantage of the condition and Miller's breakdown, world champions Tony Genvie and Eric Braithwaite strode manfully into the lead behind the disqualified Walker. It was a position they refused to relinquish, and they stormed over the finish line in majestic style for a victory, and some consolation for the unfortunate breakdown that cost them a top 3 finish the previous day. But it was a disgruntled Allenby who finished in first place in Class 2. His race had been curtailed with 2 laps still to go, so he was unable to make up his average speed sufficiently to win the Gold Cup, although the victory did secure the 1993 Class 2 championship. An easy victory then in Class 2 for the Allenbys, with no one else completing the course. In 2 litre, it was victory for the 2 litre world champions, with an improving Cornish team of Stephen Hoare and Jeff Lowcock second, and former European champion Jonathan Lucas third. But the first ever Hull Gold Cup threw up an unlikely winner overall. The man nearest to his target index speed was the oldest competitor of the day, and it was he who proved to be the wiliest. Allenby was eventually adjudged to have finished second, but he was clearly not a happy man. The crowd, however, appreciated his efforts, and they prepared to honour the crew who had spoiled his party. Alan Webb, a taxi proprietor, had taken them all on and proved he had the wherewithals and the conditions to do the job properly. It was unquestionably the highlight of his long racing career, and no one was prepared to argue that he didn't deserve it. And it was Webb, always appreciative of a good crew, who made sure his compatriots Mike Shepherd and Mike Edwards shared in the spoils. Then he explained how the conditions had favoured his challenge.
Nice, very nice, suited us. We were very rough weather boat, and it absolutely loves rough conditions. The rougher the better, because we can compete, and we can keep up at an extremely average, a very good average speed when the rough weather comes on. We're not terribly fast in the calm, but that's what it's made for, rough weather. So obviously we scored, which is very good.
Well, it was a weekend I'm sure that they and Hull will remember for a very long time. And perhaps a pointer that maybe it's time offshore powerboat racing moved out of its time warp and plucked a leaf out of a very enterprising city council's book.